Flipping houses for flipping profits. So what is a property flip, and should you really be looking at it right now? Well, a flip can have several different types of meanings, but the most typical is when you buy a rundown house, add value to it and make it somebody else's home. And the idea is to make a nice chunk of change at the end of it. Now, there are pros and cons of this that we're going to be going through, and you really need to think of the exit in mind. Let's break down the cons, the downsides of the property first. And I know that's a negative way to start, but hey, let's do it. So what we're looking at is the first thing I don't like is that it's short-term money. Now, for some of us, getting those bigger chunks of change, it's nice and all of that. But for me, I'm more of a long-term player. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll know that I love boring, vanilla buy-to-let properties. But it is pretty cool to make these chunks, but when we're looking at a short time frame, you need to look at the overall economy a lot more. Now, the reason you don't really need to do that for the longer term plays like buy-to-lets is my exit from buy-to-lets is death. So I'm 31 years old. I would like to think I've got a good few decades in me left. So the idea of interest rates, inflation, property going up, down the next year, it just doesn't matter because I'm building my wealth through time. The problem with a flip though is, let's say you're buying it, refurbishing it and selling it, and that's typically a 6 to 9 month cycle. Let's say 9 months because everyone thinks it's 6 and it turns out to be 9. I promise you it'll be 9. What's going to happen in the next 9 months? It's a lot harder to predict, but with inflation the way it is, interest the way it is, it's unlikely that we're going to see a boom. We might see a bit of stagnation, but more than likely it's going to go down a little bit. Not a dramatic sense, but you do need to factor that in, which I'll get to in about 5 minutes. The other downside is you have to be a lot better at negotiation. What I mean by this is I love sales, I love negotiating, but most people really find it hard. And you have to bear in mind that let's say I've got a property that the end value, so once it's all looking fine and perky, is going to be 150 grand and it needs 20 grand spent here. If you took that property to an estate agent, you've got 150 grand end value, needs 20 grand to even get there. You take that to the average estate agent and the estate agent will go, it's worth 150 grand. Now, of course, it's not, but most estate agents, if you are one, I'm not knocking you, by the way, most estate agents are not property people. And we make that mistake a lot, especially with residential estate agents. They're not. They're salespeople. They've got a set way of looking on Rightmove Plus to analyze the properties. And most, not all, most don't really factor this in. So imagine you're going to a vendor, somebody selling their property, who's just been told by a load of estate agents that their property will sell all day long for 150 grand. You're then trying to convince them, actually, it's going to take 20 grand to get there, and I need to make my profit margin, so I need to pay you £110,000. Bit of a harder ordeal. The final downside that comes to my mind, and you can let me know additional ones in the comments if you like, is finance routes. So it's a lot harder to finance a flip. So if you're a bit cheeky, you'll get a mortgage and refurb it and sell it on. And have I allegedly done that in the past? Maybe once or twice. Everyone does. But the truth is, if you're going to make a business out of this, you need to finance them in the right way. And mortgages is not the way to do it. In fact, you're not really meant to do it at all for doing that. So you need to use something called bridging. Now, bridging is a finance term which is bridging the gap between one way or another. So it could be you are bridging to then refinance onto a mortgage, or you're bridging the property to do it up and then sell the property. Now, bridging is higher risk, a risk that I'm absolutely fine with, but more importantly, higher costs. And when you're new to property and you've got a bit of a delusion around you, because we're all naive at the beginning, right? And we go, it's only going to take 6 months, no problem. And then you factor in your 1% or your 1.5% a month. Not that big of a deal for 6 months, but then 6 becomes 7. 7 becomes 8, 8 becomes 9, and before you know it, your 10 grand profit has dissipated. Now, it's not all downside. I'm going to get some really good parts of this and some general advice that you can be factoring in if you're looking to do flips right now. Now, over the years, I've realized that being great at doing these deals is about being in part of the best communities, being a great communicator, and ultimately surrounding yourself with the right people. But often you don't know where to find that. Well, one of my main businesses is Aspire Education. And what we do in Aspire Education is paid for education to help people build it. So we don't really do the course structure. What we do do is practical implementation education. So what that is an accountability program. Now, I'm not going to go through the full details here, but if you are interested in that at all, I'm going to put a link in the comment. I'll link it to the top or pin it to the top. Click on there, fill in your details, and what we'll do is we'll put on a completely free one-to-one strategy session, no obligation at all, just hopefully it will add value to you. If you can't work out the link, just put education in the comments. Love to have a chat with you. So what about the good things? Well, first of all, there's no long-term complications, and this is something I really like. It's fair to say the government is not as friendly as they could be to investors right now, or maybe they're looking after the bigger players, let's say. So what I do like is that you don't really need to worry about the long-term implications of macroeconomics, microeconomics, and everything that comes in. Politicians that are trying to get the vote and they need somebody to hate, which is often landlords. So it's very much in and out, and it's very simple as well. Number two, it's a very forgiving strategy. And I actually mean property overall here, in that sometimes if you look at other investment streams like stocks, a newspaper article could come out, an article could come out and flatline a share price. That doesn't really happen in property. Like, people don't go, I hate landlords, and therefore landlords drop 20% on their margin. So the cool thing about flips in general is even when the market does come down, it's really protected by the fact it's a fundamental asset that people invest in. It is literally as safe as houses. The other cool thing is that you can control the outcome a lot of the time. So a general consideration, which I'll go through, is not to pick a flip just based on the numbers. You need to pick the area. So for example, I live in an area called Alwoodley, and it's a fairly high demand area. And so when there's a property that comes up, there's bidding wars all the time. Doesn't matter whether we're in... I was trying to hold it in until the end. All right? And so it doesn't matter if the market's going up or down, the property's getting bid on by multiple people. And so what you can do is research the end demographic, look at the tiers in the area, the glass ceiling, which is the price point that the highest price that a property of this type is sold to, and actually you can smash through it again and again and again by producing higher quality. So I really like the fact that actually you can determine your outputs beforehand. Final point, and this is a consideration and then becomes a pro if you approach this professionally, is you can look at market predictions and factor that into your pricing. So I'm going to go through considerations right now, but what are the other pros that you can think of? Put them in the comments. So I'll cover off the ones that I've kind of mentioned already. So the first thing is you need to consider the market in that you're playing in. So if it's a quick trade, and the trade is a type of flip where you get a property at a price today and you put it on the market tomorrow, that's very quick. I don't really think about the market too much in that. But when it's a flip that's going to take 9 months, you need to look at market predictions. So for example, is the market going to go down in the next 12 months? Probably not a lot, to be honest. Like, people get fear-mongered by the media, but no, not really. Is it likely to boom over the next 12 months? No, it's definitely a softer market. And the cool thing about a soft market is you can get access to better areas, which should always be your long-term play, by the way, not trying to get cheap and cheerful. So let's say you wanted to factor in a 5% drop. Just as an example. So how would you do that? Well, first of all, and this is another consideration tied in with this, you need to focus on the end number. So a lot of people, they'll get a property and go, oh, they want 100,000 for this. Well, how much is it the refurb going to be? It's going to be this on top. Well, can I pay that? No, that's not how you work out a flip. The way you do it is you go, what am I going to sell it for at the end? Let's say 200,000. Then you go, what profit do I want to make? Typically, we're looking for 15% on a flip. So 15% of 200,000 is 30,000. So we're going to take the 30,000 off, so we're at 170. Then we're going to take off all of the fees, stamp duty, legals, broker, refurbishment. Let's say that's another 30,000. So now it's gone from 170 down to 140. So I can pay 140,000. So consideration is start with the end in mind and work back. Don't start at the beginning and go there. What an estate agent lists the property for is irrelevant. It's absolutely irrelevant. It means nothing to my figures. So let's say we're trying to factor in the market into this, which is a bit more sophisticated. How would we approach that? Well, if I believe there's going to be up to a 5% drop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out my end value, 200,000. I genuinely believe if I sold this today in top spec, I will sell it for 200, and then I'm going to take 5% off of that. So 5% of the 200,000 is 10,000. So that brings it to 19,000, and then I'm going to follow the same process down. So that way what I'm doing is hedging against the risk of a market downturn. 3 other considerations to look at is number 1, understanding your exit strategies. And yes, I do mean strategies. I believe every exit should have a long-term play. So even when I do flips, which I do, I probably do them on a larger scale now, some developments and things like that. Even if I'm planning to exit in 12, 18 months, which is typically 18 months for the bigger developments, I'm always looking at, well, what if I needed to keep it? What if the market changed and I thought, actually, I don't want to exit at that price, I want to hold on to this. What would that look like? And it could be that exit 1's a flip, exit 2 is buy to let, and exit 3 is service accommodation, for example. And it's really important you have those multiple exits. Number 2 is your cost considerations. Most people forget the cost. So they forget about early redemption fees, if there are any. They don't think about the admin fees on a bridging loan. They don't think about the exit fees on a loan. They just think about, oh yeah, it's going to be 6 months. What if there's contingencies that need to have? What if there's another lockdown that happens, which, touch wood, that doesn't happen, but it could. You need to think about all of the cost implications. And finally, make sure you're going for a high value area. Now, my top tip is if you are not getting fierce competition on the property, then why would you buy it? And most people have the opposite mindset. They go, oh yeah, got a great deal, no real competition. It's like, that's usually a bad sign. If I'm going for a property and I'm talking to an estate agent or the vendor and they're like, yeah, I've had like 5 people offering me X, Y, Z, I'm like, damn, I want in on this. Because if there's competition on the entry, there will be competition on the exit. And you need to make sure you've got knowledge of all of that. So aim for 15%, that would be my personal approach. Start with the end in mind and work back. Consider any market fluctuations. Maybe you want to think of that 5% downturn and make sure you're approaching this in the right way. As I said, if you're looking to get, maybe you've been watching the channel for a while, and if you're not subscribed already, by the way, hit subscribe. It's only about 50% of the continuous viewers end up subscribing, which is crazy, right? You don't want to be missing out on the new information, especially when the market is fluctuating the way it is. So hit subscribe, get information first. And on top of that, if you've been watching and you're ready to invest in yourself, just put education in the comments. I'll be in touch. We can have a one-to-one consultation call with one of my team. If not, just click the link in the comments. It will be pinned to the top, and I'll see you in the next video.